In fact, years ago I was invited to the patent office. They made me inventor of the year or something, and invited me to the patent office for a big invention thing in Washington. And the examiner, the original, examined the patent, talked about it, and we all, smiled and so forth. But the thing about the original Neurophone is that if you were to try to put this on the market, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Number one, anything that puts 3,000 volts across a person's head would scare them, even though this was 40 kilohertz and it's not really dangerous, okay? But if the mylar covering on the electrodes got a little hole in it, like a little tiny tear, you'd get a little zap to your head, and it wouldn't hurt you because the signal goes over the surface of the skin, but because it would be concentrated energy like sunlight. Sunlight focused over your whole body doesn't hurt you, but if you take that whole area of sunlight and you focus it to a pinpoint, that'll hurt you. So it's the same thing here. If you focus that 40 kilohertz, 3,000 volts through a little pinprick in the mylar, then you get an RF burn. You get a little burn on your head. It doesn't hurt, but, well, it does hurt, and it stays for a while. So you don't want to try to sell that to the public, because when you do, you put that on the market, and they get a little prick in the mylar, and pretty soon people are saying, "Well, you've now destroyed my brain." And so you couldn't do anything with the Neurophone because of that 3,000 volts, 40 kilohertz. So I went to work for the Navy. Vietnam was in full motion, and by the time I was 17 years old, Vietnam was in full motion and everything, and I was very good draft potential, and I was a gymnast. I was in perfect physical condition, and in fact, I was not just a gymnast. I was one of the world-class gymnasts, and so I was good condition for going to Vietnam. And so about when I was 17, though, by providence, instead of being drafted, I was given an offer to work for the Navy for a think tank for the Pentagon. So I went to work for the Pentagon when I was 17, and worked with Dr. Henri Coanda, the father of fluid dynamics, and I worked with Dr. Coanda on such things as he had a torpedo that would go underwater at 100 miles an hour without creating a wake. In other words, that's what the Navy wanted. But did you know, this is the most amazing thing, the Navy was financing, to show you how stupid they are, really. I mean, the Navy, all the armed services, we know they are anyway, I mean, for the most part. But, I mean, look at the fact that they allow people to charge them, $500 for a hammer, and then you got it figured out. But Coanda built this torpedo. Dr. Coanda built a torpedo that would go 100 miles an hour underwater, creating no wake. The Navy sent all these scientists into the lab in our think tank, and they saw the torpedo go around underwater. It was tethered at 100 miles an hour, creating no wake. They saw the fact that there's no wake around the torpedo. The tether had wake around, but the torpedo had none. And we launched it, in different things to show it had no wake. And the scientists said, "Well, I see it, but I don't believe it." Because they couldn't understand the principle of it, just like no one, could understand this for so long. And so they actually never implemented that, which I think is a good thing. But the fact is, I mean, it was an amazing device and would still be today. Coanda technology. Is Tom here, by the way? Tom from Australia? No? Okay. I've been talking to someone in Australia who's taken Coanda fluid technology, and he's built he's built vacuum cleaners and ceiling fans and all kinds of household appliances and things that operate on Coanda technology, fluid amplification. Well, he has a vacuum cleaner that looks like it has no moving parts, and it sucks better than any vacuum cleaner ever made. I mean, that thing is, what an incredible thing. Ceiling fan with no visible moving blades, but the thing like moves air and is totally silent and things like that. But so anyway, it's at 17 I'm working at a think tank, and working for the Pentagon. I worked for Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Department of Unconventional Warfare. Now, see, this is a story I've never told anyone. Well, I have told, but not a lot, but I mean a few people. But I consulted for Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, and Aberdeen Proving Grounds, they had Marines walking around with dowsing rods, you know, with little L wires. And when I was consulting for them, they actually had Marines walking around with dowsing rods, finding tunnels and ammunition dumps and things like that underground. And they were going to use them in Vietnam to find, you know, tunnels and things. And so that was pretty amazing that they were actually training Marines in dowsing. But one of the things they were doing is back in the 60s, they had a big worry about rioting, you know, about you know, race riots and all kinds of riots, different kinds of, you know, like hippies and all that. So they were trying to figure out how to stop large crowds from rioting without hurting them physically. In other words, actually hurting them. So one of the things they had is they had a cannon. You know what a smoke ring looks like. You know, you can blow a ring vortex, which is a smoke ring. And the nice thing about a smoke ring is that a smoke ring will carry, you know, for a great distance and retain its character, its shape. And so what they did is they built a cannon that they filled with itching powder that made smoke rings. And the idea was that if there was a crowd of people over there rioting, they'd fire this itching powder, a smoke ring of itching powder from 2 miles away, and it would carry down to the crowd, and when it hit, it would disperse, and they'd start itching all over. And they wouldn't be thinking about rioting, they'd be thinking about scratching. And so they had one of those. Now, this other device is the most insidious device. No, they had another device. Off-Broadway, back then, there was a play. It was kind of like a Dracula kind of play. And in the movies, they have what's called scare sounds. They have these low-frequency sounds that scare people. And for example, you know, when Dracula's getting ready to bite, they'd go, bah, you know, and the audience would get scared because they'd hear this, they'd feel a vibration, and the audience would get all tensed up, and then Dracula would bite. So they had this play off Broadway, and it was kind of a Dracula production, and what they decided is that they needed to make a scare frequency for the audience, you know, to enhance the play. So opening night off Broadway, what happened is that the engineer for the production company took a long sewer pipe, and he made an organ pipe into it, and he put a fan to blow air through it, and when he turned on the fan, the thing would make, you know, this low frequency sound. So it's opening night off Broadway, first night of the play, and this really happened. I swear to you, this really happened. They turned on the fan, and what happened is that the guy had found the resonant frequency of the anal sphincter muscle. And everyone in the audience crapped in their pants. And they said that it was a shitty play. No, this really happened. And and they used a sewer pipe to make the noise. And so someone at Aberdeen Proving Grounds said, well, that's a weapon if I ever saw one. Man. So what they did is they made this great big ELF low-frequency anal sphincter resonator. And the whole idea was that if people rioted, they'd just turn this thing on, and they'd all get messy and forget all about what they were doing. They'd just start trying to figure out how to clean themselves up, and because there's no control over it. And the only problem is that the guy that operated the machine, the same thing happened to him. He had to wear diapers. But so I got to see the anal sphincter resonator. You know, I got to see the smoke ring machine. I got to see the Marines using dowsing rods, which was all fun because I'd already been doing that since I was a kid. I mean, you know, the dowsing rods, not the resonator. So anyway, that was life in the think tank and so forth. So Dr. Coanda says one day, Dr. Coanda, by the way, the Coanda effect, I'll show you what it is. Dr. Coanda,
How do you spell Coanda?
C-O-A-N-D-A, Henri Coanda, that's Henry for us. But it's Henri. He had Laboratoire Coanda in Paris, but so he's in French. It was Henri, Dr. Henri Coanda, C-O-A-N-D-A. Okay. And there's some interesting stuff. Tom Lang gave me some nice sites on Dr. Coanda because what helicopter is that uses the Coanda effect? The rotorless tail helicopter? Yeah. There's a rotorless tail helicopter that uses the Coanda effect. And if you look up their internet site, they give the whole history of Coanda and what I'm about to tell you. But he built and flew a jet airplane in 1910 outside of Paris. And his jet airplane had a ramjet engine, retractable landing gear. It was a single-wing airplane with swept wings made out of plywood. And he had never even seen an airplane when he built it. He just heard that the Wright brothers had flown one, but he didn't know what it looked like. So he built this retractable, this beautiful little airplane, and he carted it outside the walls of Paris into a field, and what happened is that his airplane had a jet engine, and the exhaust was ported out the side, and what he did is he put asbestos. Like this is the exhaust of the airplane, and this is the tail of the airplane right here, right? And so he put asbestos to deflect the exhaust away from the tail, and so he's taxiing his airplane around, playing with it on the ground, and not noticing what he's doing. And he looked back and he saw that the exhaust from the jet was wrapping around at a right angle and catching the tail on fire. And he got so absorbed in the fact that the exhaust was going around a right angle curve to get the tail on fire that he didn't notice that he had goosed the jet engine up to a higher level, and he looked up and the walls of Paris were coming toward him, and he pulled back on the stick and he took off and flew. But he didn't know how to fly or land, so he crashed his jet airplane. And so this was a character that I knew when he was almost 80 years old. And not only that, for example, in World War II, when the Nazis invaded Paris, he just stayed right where he was, and he said, well, I won't bother them, they won't bother me. And of course, they would go around and do checks on people's houses, and they heard, because you couldn't get coffee in Paris back then, it was being rationed, they heard that this guy, Dr. Coanda, had coffee available. So the Nazi SS went by to see him, and he offered them coffee. And when he offered them coffee, why, they arrested him because they said he must be a member, he must be, member of the underground, or he must be a spy, or he must be dealing in stolen goods, because he's got coffee. And he tried to tell them that he was growing coffee in his little greenhouse right here. And they could have all they wanted, but they wouldn't listen, so they arrested him, took him in for interrogation, locked him away. And anyway, he bribed one of the people in the where they locked him up. He bribed somebody to remove his name and all the record of him even being there from the thing, and he walked out and went back home and continued doing his work. But so when I knew him, his girlfriend was Gloria Swanson, the famous actress Gloria Swanson, who I later became very good friends with. But that's another story in itself. But anyway, on his 80th birthday party, this was in Connecticut, on his 80th birthday party, we were over at a friend's house, and a lot of people were there. And so I'm 17 years old, and I said to Dr. Coanda, he smoked Gauloise cigarettes like they were going out of existence or style or something. But anyway, he's smoking a Gauloise cigarette with Gloria Swanson's there and everything, and he says, I said to him, Miko was his nickname, M-I-K-O, Miko. When I'm 80 years old, I hope I'm in the shape you're in. And he said, Patrick, when you're 80 years old, we'll talk about it. And everyone started laughing. And, it was a fun thing. And so a few days later, Dr. Coanda invited me into his office, and he said, we talked about you know, when you're 80, we'll talk about it and all these things. And he said, I've been looking all my life for the fountain of youth. And he said, the fountain of youth really does exist. And he said, and I've been searching for it. And he said, people think that you are what you eat. And he said, I'm here to tell you that you are what you drink. He said, what you drink is the most important nutrient you put in your body. The quality of the water you drink is the most important thing you put in your body beyond all other things. And then he went on to explain that the average human body is 70% water. The average brain is 98% water. Or not 98, 90% water, not 98. Well, some people are 98%. Some people have water on the brain, but we don't talk about them. Anyway, so the average brain is 90% water and the average body 70%. Even our bones are about 65% water. So anyway, so he said that we all learn in school that water is H2O and that it freezes at 0 degrees centigrade at sea level and boils at 100 degrees centigrade at sea level, that it has a certain viscosity and so forth. And he said this is what we're taught in school, but he said, to tell you the truth, Patrick, he said water is different everywhere you go in the world. Water profoundly changes. And he said, so he developed, now Dr. Coanda had developed the world's first snow-making machine. In fact, the first ski resorts in the world used his snow-making machine to make artificial snow way back in the 30s, you know, to make snow, you know, so people could ski if it didn't snow in the winter. They just like make their own snow. And so Dr. Coanda told me that, a secret. He said that he had traveled to 5 places on Earth: Hunzaland, the county of Georgia in Russia, the Vilcabamba in Ecuador, a place in Peru, and a place in Mongolia where people lived to be over 100 while maintaining excellent health. And what he did is he made snow from their water, one of the things he did. And, you know, snow crystals, I won't draw a good snow crystal, but if you take a leg of a snow crystal, you know, they're usually hexagonal and have all kinds of shapes. But if you take the leg of a snow crystal and you look at it under a microscope, you'll see that it contains a hollow tube all the way down the center. Even if that snow crystal is formed, you know, at 20 degrees or 30 degrees below zero, the snow crystal has a little bit of liquid water circulating through it. It's got a whole, you know, if you take a snow crystal that's hexagonal and they have all these little crystal, you know, formations like this, water circulates throughout the entire snow crystal. It actually circulates like it has a circulatory system. And he told me that snowflakes are alive. They're living beings, living entities. And he said that when a snow crystal is formed, it has a certain lifespan depending on the temperature. For example, he said a snow crystal formed at 20 degrees below zero. In Hunzaland, this water remains liquid for about 12 hours before it freezes. So he said that snow crystal has a lifespan of 12 hours. But he said if you take water from Chicago or Paris or New York or London or Madrid or wherever and you freeze that, he said it might freeze in about 6 hours at the same temperature, 6 hours. So there's a big difference in the life of snow crystals, and he said it's due to molecular structure of the water itself. Yes?
What about the still water?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the minerals in it. I mean, the freezing temperature is depressed a little bit depending on what minerals and things are in it, but the life of the circulatory system is based on something else. So he said he didn't know what it was that gave the snow crystal the life. He just knew what it was. And not only that, but he told me about certain anomalous physical properties of water. And he said he was turning all of his research over to me because he said, Patrick, someday you will build a machine or some way of making Hunza water available to everyone in the world. And so he turned all his research over to me. And Dr. Coanda knew water so well that he could examine the water at any place in the world and could predict the average lifespan within 5 years of people that lived in that area just by testing the water. So he said that's how important water is to us. And he told me, he said, Patrick, in my lifetime, I will not complete my work on water but he said, I feel that you will. So he turned all his research over to me, gave me all of his information on anomalies and so forth, and I began my own quest for the Fountain of Youth when I was 17 years old. So in parallel with all the other things I was doing and my esoteric studies and so forth and the yoga, I'm going to tell you a little bit more. I'm going to get off of this for a minute because also at the age of 17, a weird thing happened to me. Well, weird thing happened to me, yeah. Because I was doing gymnastics, you know, in a gymnasium one day,